the recent case with Miguel Torres. After his fight at UFC 145, there's a video escalated sometime later about. I'm not sure if you guys were able to catch this while it was still online, but it got pulled really, really quickly down by the UFC for copyright grounds. He was really, really confused. Thought he'd just fought Mark Hominick. Really, really out of it, and just scary level of injury after his knockout by Michael McDonald. So, Tony, we've had you on here because you're the medical expert. How bad do you think the concussion problem is in MMA, and what do you think the UFC and various bodies should be doing about it?
Well, with any combat sport, you're going to have issues with brain injuries. It's going to happen, unfortunately. And the question is the UFC doing its job? This is becoming the forefront with everything from football to hockey, obviously boxing, and now UFC is coming mainstream with it. Dana White has publicly come out, on several occasions and said that UFC is the safest sport there is. Whether that's true...
That's definitely not true.
Yeah.
I played snooker.
It's not true.
Golf.
I think they do. I'm sorry. What were you saying, Charlie?
It's just saying, golf.
Yeah. Well, yeah, golf, bowling.
A lot of back injuries in golf.
Yeah.
that is a good point, actually.
Right. Are they doing as much as they can right now? From what again, I'm not in the inner circle of the UFC. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. I don't know. Dana came out, public, and he specifically said something like football, like the NFL. If somebody like Tom Brady, gets concussed, and he could, if the doctors say, listen, he's going to be out for the rest of the year, there goes New England's chances for playoffs. Their team's counting on him. They're going to try to do what they can to get him back in the game. Now if somebody like, for instance, Krzysztof Szczecinski or TJ Grant is another example right now. He's getting ridiculed for getting hurt in training and saying he's lying about concussions. Is the event going to stand still? No, nobody's counting on that person except for their own self. So somebody like TJ Grant, Szczecinski, they're only, by losing time, I don't want to say they're hurting themselves, but they're hurting their chances to, for a title, but they're saving their brain. The UFC does do rigorous testing, before, and they're cleared, and then they do testing afterwards. And, a couple of, the research I've been reading and everything in the past week, if somebody's knocked out, regardless, they go and get a CAT scan.
Yeah.
That's mandatory. Right there, that's something that doesn't go on anywhere else. Right there, you could tell, for anything, if there's a brain bleed or anything like that, there's a common misconception that a concussion is a bruise to the brain. And it's not. Can it be? Sure. But, a bruise technically is classified as bleeding. When you get a bruise on your leg, it's black and blue because that's blood that's collected underneath the skin. That would be, maybe a hematoma or, cerebral hemorrhage, in worst case scenarios. So the concussion, I think a lot of people don't know about concussions and are not informed. Pretty much it's a blow to the head that causes, the brain to smack against the skull. We have the cerebral spinal fluid that courses through, our spinal column and our brain that's there to cushion it. Well, you get hit in the head and I'm sorry, but fluid's not going to stop it. And your brain hits the skull, and you get a concussion. Also, if you get knocked out, it's pretty much ruled a concussion, but people also don't know that you don't have to be knocked out to get a concussion as well. Personally, I'm up to 5 concussions myself, so I could personally speak for it, that I've only been knocked out once when I've had them. It's not fun. And you guys, I'm pretty sure, can relate to as well as how it is.
Oh, yeah.
The one thing, too, they were, I watched a press conference where they talked about it, and they had, a panel. Dana, I forget, it was a press conference for one of the fights. And Bones Jones and Tito Ortiz and Frank Mir all talked about it. And a couple of things, they said, sure, you're going to have people that get, concussed and everything. But the point that they drove home, too, is there's always been debate, boxing, MMA, which is worse. And with boxing, you have a standing 8 count. So pretty much if a guy is dazed and concussed, he wants to stay in that fight. You're a fighter. Your natural instinct is to win. You don't, if you're anybody that's a competitor, the one thing you're not going to say is I quit. I'm done. Like, it's not, you don't want that. You train so hard for this. So standing 8 count gives the boxer time to clear out the cobwebs and say, okay, you know what? I'm good. The referee makes that decision on the spot. Here we go. We're going back in. Well, guess what? You know, he may be dazed. What do you think the boxer on the other side is doing? He's going after the knockout. And a lot of the research on concussions say the problem is it's not the initial blow. It's the time to recover. So say that, you know, somebody's in the ring, got hit by Tyson back in the day and, you know, knocks him down. He gets up. He's wobbly. You know, referee asks him to come to him. He's like, okay, I'm good. He may be concussed already. Now you just put him back in harm's way. He's going to take another couple shots to knock him out. You know, the UFC doesn't do that. That's why we have these stoppages. Yes, people are going to say, okay, well, what about the TKOs when, you know, the guy is clearly out and by the time the referee gets there, he's taken a couple other shots? Sure. Is that healthy? No. You know, what are you going to do? It's tough. It's a combat sport. I mean, it is what it is. People are going to get hurt. There's going to be people that are, you know, going to have brain injury, and I'm sure more is going to come out later on. And I think as of right now, I think they're on the right track. Is there proper procedures? I don't know if there ever is. I mean, we're talking about our brain. It's a vicious sport. Your goal is to finish the guy. The guy is to win the fight. You know, granted, the rounds aren't as much, and there's other disciplines involved. You know, like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, everything else. You're gonna get hit in the head. There are people coming out with it now, but I'm sure there's other ones that, you know, are having difficulty too. Gary Goodridge came out and is now suffering from, I believe it's called dementia pugilistica,
CTE.
which is you know, fighter-induced, you know, dementia. But he did come and say that his is more due to the kickboxing when he was in K1, which could be understandable because there's standing 8s there, and there's, you know, the goal. There's no wrestling in that, just kicking and punching. And also Gary was, you know, famous for his Pride days too. Pride's a whole other animal. I was completely, as fun as it is to watch somebody get kicked in the face when they're on the ground, it's barbaric. I mean, I've written an article on soccer kicks and, you know, stomps. Now, if the UFC did that, then there'd be a whole different scenario. It would be banned in most of the states. That was something that was vicious. And yeah, of course, it's a barbarian thing. It was kind of cool to watch. I'll admit it. It was also gruesome to watch. You know, you see people like Shogun and Vanderlei, you know, use that to shoot box, you know, that technique. That's a different story. So those guys in Pride, like Goodridge, you know, they've taken some of those blows. That's a direct blow from the foot. I mean, it's like kicking a soccer ball. There's not a good outcome with it at all. So, you know, there's some studies going out with these concussions, and a lot of them are biased. Like the University of Toronto just did a study, and they ranked it as the instances of knockouts per occurrence was at 15.9 per 100 fights. And that topped all the other major sports. Like National Football League was around 8%. Boxing was at 4.9%. And hockey was at about 2%. Again, though, if you look at their study, if anybody looks it up, it was a lot of videotaping. It was a lot of watching old fights. And how the hell I don't understand that at all. They were looking at the scorecards and they were looking at the fights. I don't, and again, did they look at the medical reports? No. So the study's kind of skewed. I find it really weird that 16%, it was way more than the National Football League.
Yeah.
And, you know,
insane.
that doesn't, you know, it's double the National Football League. Something like football and in hockey, which I'm familiar with, being a former hockey player, we're going 30, 40 miles an hour on skates, slamming in each other. Same thing with football. They're contact every play. Those linemen are hitting each other, and now, the helmet's a helmet hits, and the guys are in the air, and, with the UFC and, boxing, I think is a lot different. You're taking a lot more blows in boxing than you are in UFC. It's going to be a problem. There's no getting away from it. It's sad. You hear stories about Sosinski and Torres and, Goodridge. You hear about, like TJ Grant is taking the proper thing, but there is the other thing. The training that leads up to it. TJ Grant is now, he keeps delaying his return, and he's getting a lot of backlash from people and fans that aren't informed on how serious it is. And he was in, training camp, and I think he just, he doesn't want to rush back. He was getting the post-concussion syndrome, where his body's just telling him no. And Sosinski, the same thing with him. He was sparring against a 155-pounder who hit him in the face, and that's when he knew, his brain said enough. We have these warning signs in our body, and, a lot of people don't realize that concussion, there's one treatment for it. It's rest. And when I mean rest, it means do nothing. No, no texting, no reading, no television, nothing. Plain rest. And I think the UFC, while their policy is you get knocked out, it's 3 months minimum. 3 months, you're suspended. Then you have to go see a doctor. I doubt the UFC is getting some bullshit doctors that are doing these tests. They know what they're doing. They're hired by the Ultimate Fighting Championship, premier organization. You have the best of the best. You have some of these guys that sit on the athletic commissions. They have to go through those too. To reapply for a license, you have to sit in front of the board. You have to prove yourself. There's a lot of things in place. Granted, boxers do the same thing too, but, again, the rounds with boxing versus the rounds in UFC, the amount of strikes you get, the standing 8 count that I, referred to earlier, there's no standing 8 count in the UFC. You get knocked. You saw John McCarthy call it on Henderson. But Henderson's going to go get a CAT scan. He's going to be suspended for 3 months minimum, if not more. They're going to get the proper tests. Right there with the CAT scan. I don't know that boxing, and I know for a fact NHL, NFL, any of the other sports don't send a guy for concussion. They may sit him out a little bit. But even in baseball, and something as innocuous a sport as that, if somebody gets hit with a pitch and it's not too serious, or somebody slides and their head hits a guy's leg, they may be dazed. They'll do the trainer will do the on-site testing, where he's found the finger and, okay, who's the president and who's doing this and that. They pass that. Okay, but is that test 100%? Absolutely not. And most times they get rushed back in the game, like I said earlier with the NFL. Your franchise is depending on this star quarterback. UFC, it's a little bit different. It's an individual sport. And I don't know. I have nothing but, good things to say about the UFC as far as the way they've handled it. Again, though, I'm not in the inner circle. Could there be some other stuff going on? I don't know. But nobody's come out and said anything negative. Out of all the people that have come out and talked about it, they haven't said anything. Same thing like with Sosinski. He even said that Dana, they had a talk, and Dana White sent him for further tests. Dana retired him. Dana could have said, listen, you're okay. We're going to push you, and he didn't force him. He said, okay, you know what? You're mixing your words. You're counting. You can't count backwards from 20 to 0. Let's send you for tests. And, Sosinski did say, quote unquote, he's not getting worse, but he's not getting better either. So, he's doing everything he can right now. He's reading books right now. He's trying to cut out the TV in his life. He states he has no long-term memory loss. Now there's nutrition things, what could help feed the brain. They're talking about anti-inflammatory foods, a lot of fish oils and things like that. common sense food. Don't eat a double cheeseburger with fries. Some people like that vegan lifestyle, Adam, but that's not for me. But
yeah, I'm with you on that one.
So, it is what it is. I mean, a lot of people, and Dana also said, they go overboard on safety. And when you go overboard on that, you can't go wrong with it. There's going to be instances, I hope we never see, a fighter succumbing to a brain injury. Is there a chance it could happen? Sure. I mean, there could be an underlying condition. I think the UFC has done a wonderful job. I mean, Stefan Struve is another example. I mean, completely going off topic now with his heart, but they, medically, they're on top of what they're doing. So I like what they're doing. I think a lot of people are misinformed with it. Concussion, they think I got knocked on the head. Okay, I'm going to sit out for a little bit. I'll be okay. No, concussion, what people don't realize is it's kind of a chemical reaction that helps and it's a protective mechanism in the brain. And, you need rest and you need time, because what happens is, I'm going to get a little geeky for a second, but, you have channels in the cells, and what happens is this potassium in your cells rushes out when these cells get damaged. Well, it causes depolarization. So an influx of calcium comes in the cells. Well, calcium is a known inhibitor of energy. So these cells around it shut down as a protective mechanism. So your brain, when you're saying your brain shutting down, my brain's saying no, it really is. That's why you lose consciousness. That's why you get amnesia. And what people realize is that even though, it may, the reaction occurs within 30 minutes, it takes a while to restore. It could take days for all that to go back. And that's why when you see, if you ever gotten hit, between the eyes or something, you actually see stars, that is the phenomenon occurring when the depolarization in the cells is going on. So it's actually a real thing. And you need that body to recover. That's why they're saying you need to rest. You need to shut the brain off and have it heal. Just like an open wound, if you get cut, it's not going to go away right away. You got all these cells inside your brain saying, listen, we need a break. So, there's never going to be any certainty on it. Like, if you stopped it too early, if you stopped it too late, should this guy be, what can we do when the guy's actually knocked out and the fighter gets there and hits him a couple more times? Obviously, it's not good to get hit when you're already out. But what can you do? You can't. That's the nature of the beast, So that whole long speech, that's my what I've seen so far. I think the UFC is doing everything in their power to prevent these and to actually, the education is there as well too. I think the fighters and their camps are educated as well. They're the cut man and they have the physicians at ringside. You don't have that in a lot of, you do have physicians on site in boxing and everything else. And, but, top of the line, they're there. They go to the emergency room right away. Like I said, the CAT scans, and the CAT scans will immediately tell if there's something serious going on. So I like what's in play. I want to hear, what do you guys have to say? What do you guys think about the whole situation?
Well, I know do you want to go first, Charlie?
Yeah, sure. If someone wants to turn down their speakers, that would be all right, because I think we're getting a little bit of bleed. But yeah, I was just wondering, you mentioned pride rules earlier and how they're very different. Do you have any opinions on any of the other rules, like, like kicks to the head, knees to the head, like repeated knees to the head? Is this something we could end up seeing taken out of the rules at some point?
It's tough, because then if you start taking out more of the things, is it going to be mixed martial arts anymore?
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be basically wrestling and kickboxing. And Muay Thai is one of the martial arts. It's I think these fighters, to get somewhere like the UFC and these higher levels, you have to be an accomplished athlete. You're the best of the best, especially at the UFC. Not so much more Bellator and World Series of Fighting, but they're still That's like what, less than 1% of all these fighters that make it this far. They're educated enough. I don't. It's tough. I mean, yes, from a medical standpoint, knees shouldn't be allowed, sure, but that's not the sport.
No,
you
of
know,
course.
it's
Yeah, 100%.
elbows and knees are. It's going to happen. The whole grounded opponent. I think they're doing the best they can with that. Although the fighters we notice are taking advantage of that, which I think is a bullshit rule now. If you put your hand down,
There should be a point penalty for it. I mean, why not?
Yeah, sure.
If you're shown to be stalling, or a yellow card system like Pride,
Sure. I agree with that completely.
then you keep the safety and you keep the sport.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think they should? Do you think they should step in with certain fighters who are getting repeated knockouts, such as Gray Maynard, obviously being the current example?
Yeah. Yes, and I do think that some of that is in place. I don't think we see it. I mean, somebody that gets knocked. I mean, you remember now, like somebody like Gray, if he gets knocked out, he's got to go get a CAT scan, number one, and then he's suspended. Do they need to sit down with him again? Yes, I would think so. I think they are doing it. I think, and they don't just see a regular physician. They're seeing neurologists that are going through the brain function and giving the battery the tests. I don't believe they would. I bet you they do. I don't know for certainty if they do give them, I don't want to say preferential treatment, but special treatment. And, maybe say, listen, we're going to look at you and it's time to be, done. And unfortunately, yeah, people stay past their prime. Boxing's greatest athlete ever stayed past his prime. And now look at him. And that's a whole other topic for debate, whether his Parkinson's was caused by it.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other thing. And the research that I found with that, and I remember I took a class in undergrad, actually, before pharmacy school, and it was about pharmacology, and we went to the Parkinson's drugs. And, a kid in class asked about Muhammad Ali and if it was caused. At the time, this was 2004 or 2003, somewhere around there. At the time, they were doing studies, and there was no link between, blows to the head and, the disruption in the brain that causes Parkinson's. Now, since then, it's come out, and it's subject to controversy that, he was predisposed to it, and boxing just kind of hastened that along. So they said he probably would have gotten Parkinson's anyway. It didn't help that he got punched, but they also said it didn't help that he stayed past his prime because, Ali was the greatest of all time, but then his last, his fights where he got obliterated. I mean, last fight against Trevor Berbick, he took a lot of blows. And that could have, so that's the other thing too. Are some of these fighters, and there's always going to be one or two fighters that are going to keep going. Maybe Gray Maynard's going to be one. Maybe 10 years, God forbid, he's going to be a mess. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But we don't know. And I mean, like same thing with like Sashinsky and Miguel Torres and even TJ Grant right now. They were saying Tom DeBlas came out about it too, his concussions with memories, and even Martin Kampman. Kampman said, he's not retiring, but he's taking his time now. So, I think with his relative infancy with the UFC and the fact they started regulating fights, I don't think we're going to see the full ramifications of these fighters yet. It's going to come. I mean, same thing, look with football. I mean, it just came out now with that multi-million-dollar lawsuit when this was going on. And I think people, in the age of lawyers and suing and all that stuff, is some of it bullshit, sure. But there's it's a problem. With research the way it's come now too, that's another beautiful thing in the medical world. As we're learning more about our bodies, and we're always going to learn. The human body is the biggest enigma on the planet. And sometimes we don't know what goes on inside and what's happening, and if we're predisposed to something, and if I took a punch versus you, one of us could be fine and the other one could be concussed. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Once you get one concussion, you're prone to getting a second one, and so.
Do you think with older fighters, because Charlie has a theory about Chuck Liddell, do you think we're going to start, because we're a young sport, we've not had like fighters really grow old yet. who've
Sure.
had years in the sport taking blows. So do you think it's possible we're going to start seeing fighters who've retired develop problems later in life because
Sure.
of the blows they've taken?
Sure.
Especially the Pride guys.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's the Pride for sure. I mean, and that's the thing. You see, like I said, talked about Goodridge earlier. He's saying it's from kickboxing. How the hell does he know it's from kickboxing?
Yeah.
I mean, as much as he's saying that, he could be right, but it could be from Pride. It could be from, UFC. I think we are, unfortunately, and we don't know. I mean, Tito Ortiz has said, he forgets things and he does things. I mean, I haven't competitively fought, did some training, here and there, just because I'm too old to get hit in the face, It's, I don't really prefer to get punched anymore. So I did that on the ice. But I mean, even now, in my 30s, I forget things. And, I never did this professionally. I did my whole life, but collegiately was the highest I've gotten, and just getting hit in the head. And I mean, I'm sure, like I said, forgetting things, headaches, short-term memory loss. Some people like Chuck and like even these Pride fighters, all of them, Mark Coleman and, Shogun and Silva's and, we're going to see. Yeah, unfortunately, we're probably going to see that.
Yeah, especially the guys from camps that such as Shooter Box, where they've gone all out in the gym, every day of the week.
Yeah.
That's going to start taking its toll on them sometimes. I mean, all of them, we get guys like Shogun who are in their early 30s, and their knees are fucked anyway.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. It's going to start.
The brain's part of the body anyway.
Yeah. I mean, your joints, obviously, that's the first. That's going to be issues. But, the brain, and we don't know. I mean, some of these fighters right now could be too proud. And that was the thing when a lot of these guys were talking about it. For Sashinsky, I watched the interview again. And, the first time he said it was on Inside MMA. And nobody really knew about it. And they kind of, with Boston, the other dude, I don't even, who's the other guy? Yeah. So when they were talking about him, to him, they kind of applauded him for, coming out per se. It's a very macho, if I say, sport. I mean, it's a very proud sport. You're a fighter. You're a badass. Like, you pride yourself on taking punches. You pride yourself on knockout power and, obviously submission. But, I mean, for the mainstream, there's nothing more satisfying than a knockout win. Submissions are nice and they're beautiful to look at for people that understand the sport and people that enjoy it and are jiu-jitsu nuts and, any grappling and wrestling. But there's nothing like it. Somebody that's uneducated could see somebody get knocked the hell out. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
You hear them all the time from people like Rampage and Chuck and any of those guys that just want to knock people out. And it's definitely a crowd pleaser. They're not, I have a feeling that some of these guys, who knows, Chuck may be going through some of that stuff right now, where he forgets things that he may not be talking about, and he might just be, brushing it off like, oh, it's no big deal. So we really don't know. I think there's more people that are out there, honestly, that aren't really stepping up. And I know in Las Vegas with the Cleveland Clinic, they're doing a study. They started 2 years ago, where it's a volunteer study where the fighters are coming in and they're getting evaluated. The thing is, they're fighters that are currently, fighting. So that's but it's tough again because you can't look at the brain really until the person's deceased. You can look at it, but you can't really, even an MRI and a CAT scan are just slices of pictures. You don't see truly what it is until you actually examine them. And that's why you see, people after their death, that's when a lot of these findings are happening. So, and then, you link it to suicides and all that stuff too, what's going on. And, the brain is a complex organ. And, unfortunately, yes, I do think that we're going to see a lot of these other fighters come out with it. It's going to be a sad day. But again, it's the nature of the sport. It's not making excuses for it, but it is what it is. It's a fight. It's fighting. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, glad to hear the UFC, like in your opinion, are handling it in the best way. They seem to be handling it in a good way anyway.
Sure.
It's a dark, scary thing, yeah. I mean, I had my own brush with concussions. I got knocked out clean from a slam, and I don't remember most of the session. And 3 days after, I went back to sparring because, like, you know how like fighters are sometimes. We're dickheads.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
I just thought, yeah, fuck it, it's fine. Go back to sparring, and I took like quite a light punch. They usually would walk through, and I just went dizzy, and I had to go to the emergency room, and so it wasn't a nice occasion, and it was just fucking terrifying experience of later because I couldn't do anything with my degree then. Like I was just going to classes and like sounding like an idiot.
Right.
Because I was like, what's this? What am I doing? And I was in like this constant state of confusion. So it really annoys me when people treat the concussion issue really lightly. I can't remember. There was a guy who retired not that long ago, citing like his fear of concussions and brain injuries. A UFC fighter. I can't remember his name.
Was it Bocek?
No, not Bocek.
Him?
Before Bocek. This was several months ago. I can't remember the guy's name, but yeah, I heard on one podcast and they were calling him a pussy, and it's like, fuck off.
Ugh. Yeah. Allow me to go knock that guy out, and then we'll see what he says afterwards.
Yeah, it's not fun. I mean, it's I got clean the first time I got knocked. I don't even know if I got knocked out, but I was in a summer league skating in between college, it's kind of an invite only league, and we were playing with pros, NHL players, and it was invite only college players, and I mean, I shouldn't have been in this league. These guys playing against millionaires that were skating circles around me. But I remember I got, in the hockey world, it's called a hockey pass or a hospital pass. And I got a pass coming out of my zone. And basically I had to look back. And next thing you know, when I received the pass, I looked up and there's a guy coming full speed at me. Couldn't do anything. I remember my face hitting his chest. And I guess I was airborne. And I hit the ground, I hit the ice. I was not unconscious, and I skated, and I stayed on the ice, and I went to the bench, and like an idiot, I played the rest of the game. That night, I took my buddy home. I drove him home, and he lives in a cul-de-sac. It took me 45 minutes to get out of his cul-de-sac, so I couldn't remember how to get out, and it was one of those things. It's frightening.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show to talk about this. Anyway, I mean, I think there needs to be a lot more people informed of this issue as it's going to be becoming more prominent in MMA for years to come, and more understanding of this. So with guys like Shashinsky, I was reading through like forums, and there's a lot of people, like you said, who aren't informed of the subject. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge on this.
You're welcome.
So yeah, should we move on to like the other news stories of the week?
Yeah, sure.